Hello everyone and welcome back to Age Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar, and in this video I am very excited as this will be the first of my updated very long army series for the Slaves of Darkness, which is an army I absolutely love and adore. So this video will be called their Lore Part 2, and the reason behind that is because I have actually done a lore video for them already on the channel, but that was about 2 years ago now, before they had a battle tome. So that mainly covers who they were in the world that was, the Warriors of Chaos, and how they translated over into Age of Sigmar. Whereas this video, in part 2, is going to be talking about their history in Age of Sigmar and where they stand now. We're also going to be taking a good look at the Chaos Gods because they play a huge role in the Slaves of Darkness. And then the other thing we are going to look at is going to be all about the path to glory, as that is such a crucial part to every member of the Slaves to Darkness. So the first thing I want to mention is, why are they called the Slaves of Darkness? What is the meaning behind their name? So essentially they're called the Slaves of Darkness because they are actually slaves. You may see these mighty warriors and think like, how is this Chaos Lord a slave? It's because all of their souls have been surrendered for either merely survival. They could have been a civilization of order that was conquered by forces of chaos and they were given a choice to surrender to the dark gods or to be slaughtered, and some of them surrendered to survive. It could also be as soon as they start their path to glory, to get power, and even those who bargain away their souls to survive have also begun their path to glory, which, like I say, is something we're going to get to later. But just so you understand, and that is why they're called the Slaves of Darkness, because I'll be honest, before I really knew much about them, I thought Warriors of Chaos, you know, from the old world, that makes sense. That's, you know, they're the Warriors of Chaos. Whereas in this, why are they slaves? They don't really look like your typical obedient little maids. So that is the reason why it's their souls themselves, because they could be, like I say, an incredibly powerful warlord. However, when they are finally defeated in battle, or simply the Chaos Gods become bored of them, their soul is damned for eternity. And that's their name. So another interesting fact I want to say about the Slaves of Darkness is they're actually the most widespread human inhabitants of the mortal realms. So what I mean by this is, if you look at a population of humans in the mortal realms, or just mortals in general, as a whole, the highest percentage of them will belong to the many tribes and war bands of the Slaves of Darkness themselves. Believe me when I tell you that all these cities of Sigmars and Bastions of Order, they're incredibly small in comparison to the territory that belongs to the Slaves of Darkness. I'll show you a map a bit later in the video that really goes into detail and really shows you just how insignificant the amount of land the forces of order actually have compared to the forces of the dark gods and the Slaves of Darkness. And then the other sort of thing I wanted to quickly say before we go into like the history of them is, the Slaves of Darkness, you may think of them as how they were as the Warriors of Chaos in the world that was, where they were a case of very much seemed to be marauding war bands. You know, they descended essentially from the Chaos Wastes and Norska, laid siege to the Empire in Kislev, and really just went as far as they could, burning and sacking and razing until they're eventually pushed back. Whereas in Age of Sigmar, they are very much conquerors in the sense of, when they conquer some territory, they tend to build a fort there, or a bastion, or some sort of defensible structure. You know, when they take territory, they intend to keep it. It's not just, you know, as simply as a bulldozer just going as far as you can until you run out of fuel. The Slaves of Darkness are very much conquerors and not just raiders. Of course, you do have lots of different tribes in the Slaves of Darkness and lots of different legions and warbands. The Slaves of Darkness are by no means a completely united force. Most of the time, they're completely at war with each other. They will maybe not distinguish any difference between a force of order and another force of chaos. If it's an adversary to them, it's an enemy and an opponent, and more than anything, for the Slaves of Darkness, a challenger that must be eliminated. And like I say, with how divided the Slaves of Darkness are, and they can be, this is also due to cultural differences as well. There's so many cultures within the Slaves of Darkness. You can literally take so many examples they already have, or you can make up so many yourself. A great way of seeing this is if you look at the different warbands you have for Warcry, the ones that came out specifically for that game. We have things like the Unmade, the Cypher Lords, the Cabal, the Iron Golems. There's many examples out there you can see, and just in the difference of the models you can see their culture, and obviously there's loads of lore you can explore in that itself. For example, the Splintered Fang, the one that's all about the snakes, they have a Chaos Elf in their warband. So, you know, what's all that about? You can read into it as much as you like. That can be a topic for a different video, but it shows there's so much to it rather than just they all look like the standard barbarians or Vikings or these huge iron-cladded warriors, like if you think of the standard Chaos Warriors. So there's so much to them, and you can really explore that with how you would like to, you know, build, paint, convert, whatever you want to do, or build in the lore behind your own army. Okay, so now that I think we've got a good established foundation to launch the rest of this lore video off to, now that we know basically who the Slaves to Darkness are, let's really have a dive in, and we are going to do that by, like I say, looking at their history in the mortal realms. And of course we'll be starting with the Age of Myth, which might sound a bit weird because this is the time when Sigmar formed his pantheon of gods, and through that order they managed to turn most of the tribes of humans, dwarves and elves into great and mighty civilizations to colonize the rest of the mortal realms. However, although they turned, like I said, many of these tribes into civilizations, they did not turn all of them, and there were still some very primitive tribes out in the wilds. And it was these tribes the dark gods whispered to, disguised as each tribe's deity, and really started to influence those tribes and clans into committing acts that would boost the dark god's power. For example, tribes in the realm of fire and Ashi, they fought with more bloody conviction, slaughtering more and no longer giving mercy or respite to the surrendering members of rival clans. Even high scholars and philosophers, so not even the tribes, but what would be referred to as high-thinking individuals, would start to pursue dangerous knowledge with obsession. And with all these little influences going on here and there, the Pantheon of Order did very little to notice what was going on, and this was mainly because, as we all know, it started to fall apart. Gorka Morka didn't really like the idea of no fighting. Nagash realised that Sigmar is a thieving prick, and it all started to fall apart. And this was partly down to, again, the Dark Gods, because it may seem pretty tough challenge for them to do at the time. Bear in mind how little power they had and how outside the mortal realms they were. Even they could start manipulating the Pantheon to encourage it to fall apart. And fall apart it did. So that was the Age of Myth, and that was really how the Slaves of Darkness began. Like I said, by turning these tribes, corrupting them into what would become the followers of Chaos. So then moving in fittingly to the Age of Chaos. So this is when the forces of the Slaves to Darkness grew bigger than ever before. So that means the tribes that once were out in the wilds had grown bigger, had become more brutal, had started to worship more of the Chaos Gods. And also with each civilization that once prospered in the Age of Myth, now facing annihilation, they would be split into those who would join the forces of Slaves to Darkness and Chaos as a whole, and those too weak or stubborn to surrender their souls to the Dark Gods. And funny enough, most people who are offered the choice tend to surrender their souls as a way to survive. It's better to live this day and face the consequences after death, as most people would prefer to wear the boot of the oppressor than be stamped out by it. Also, in the Age of Chaos, when Sigmar saved what he could and shut the gates to Azir and when Illyrio retreated to the safety of her secret grove, and Nagash was defeated at the Battle of the Burning Skies. That is when all organised resistance to the forces of the Dark Gods ended. All what remained were the few remaining mortal settlements being snuffed out like candles in the wind, and Roman clans of destruction. Due to the Slaves of Darkness seeing this as victory, they turned on each other, as the Dark Gods will only join forces for a common goal, and once it has been achieved, they will resume their unending war with each other. However, Archaon the Ever-Chosen, and Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse and Destroyer of the world that was, along with his most dedicated followers, did not declare victory, for his goal of toppling Sigmar from his throne still remained locked away behind the gates of Azir. As well as obliterating any resistance in the mortal realms, Archaon spent the Age of Chaos trying to break open the gates of Azir themselves, and came close to doing so, but never fully succeeded. Then leading on to the Age of Sigmar, of course where we are now, it was when there seemed to be no trace of hope left in the mortal realms. Sigmar unleashed his weapon he had spent centuries in the making to forge. This, of course, being the Stormcast Eternals, and they were Sigmar's gamble to make a beachhead in hope of reclaiming the realms from chaos. By firstly trying to reclaim the realm gates that allowed travel between the realms, when the Stormcast came thundering down from the heavens at these strategic locations, the Slaves of Darkness were hit completely off guard and suffered many brutal losses, for they had spent centuries not in war but slaughter, slaying any small forces of civilization or clans of destruction, or even themselves. The Slaves of Darkness were not used to fighting a powerful united enemy, such as the demigod warriors being the Stormcast Eternals. However, as Sigmar's victory in claiming back territory in the mortal realms grew, there evidently became a tipping point where the Slaves of Darkness, now no longer caught by surprise, had started to become more united against this new worthy challenge to their tyrannic rule. And as so, countless of the Slaves of Darkness claimed many victories in the name of the Dark Gods, and were given many gifts and boons in return, becoming more and more equal in power to their new demigod adversaries. Now the forces of order had lost the element of surprise. They had become the many scattered candlelights in a sea of darkness. Sigmar had even lost crucial tactical locations, such as many of the realm gates and of course the all points, a centerpiece at the heart of the mortal realms, where whoever controlled it could travel to any of the realms they desired. This is now under Archaon's cruel iron grip, and his capital known as the Varanspire, whose very towers pierce the realm of chaos itself. Although Sigmar and the forces of order are now a large challenge to the Slaves of Darkness rule of the mortal realms, the war clans of the forces of destruction have swelled in size and have become a lot more than the rabble of fighters they once were. And of course the legions of Nagash, the Undying King, have become a huge threat to the forces of chaos, and have even laid siege to the all points themselves. And the only last thing I want to add on to the history segment and where they are now is, like I said earlier, I wanted to show you a picture, which is a map. So this is just simply a picture I've taken from the Battletome, which shows a segment of the map from the Realm of Fire, known as the Great Parch. And what you can see towards the centre of the map, you can see Hammerhall. and this is obviously the part of Hammer Hall that's in the Realm of Fire. But what this really shows is that, and with a few other locations spotted around the map, apologies, if you're watching this on a smaller phone, it's a bit hard to see, but what you can see is small bastions of order. And this is what I was trying to prove when I was talking about the history and keeping using terms like pinpoints of order, or things like candles, flames in the darkness, because that's all it is. Everything else is under control of the Slaves to Darkness in this example anyway. And you can see how the territories are breaking up from not just simple chaos symbols, but the forces of Khorne. You've got Nurgle, you've got Tzeentch, you've got Slaanesh, you've got Undivided. And it really shows just how surrounded these bastions of order are, and how quickly they can be, like I said, like candles snuffed out by the darkness. So this gave me a lot of perspective when I did my research for this video. And this is something that really, apart from reading the words that tell you what the situation is, when you actually can visualize it by seeing a map like this, I love a good old map, it really brings home just actually how little the forces of order have conquered back in the Mortal Realms, how little territory they have reclaimed. They are still tiny little segments of a map, and it's basically, if they don't have a wall around something, it's not going to last. So this was really interesting for me to see, and I think it really lends perspective just to show you how surrounded by the Slaves of Darkness the forces of order are. And that is why I wanted to show it to you guys. So with that concludes the history bit of the Slaves to Darkness, covering, like I say, where they were through the Age of Myth, Age of Chaos, and the Age of Sigmar, until where they are now. So with that, I want to move on to talk about the Chaos Gods, as I think it's very important and crucial to mention them, and particularly in a bit of detail, as we will do when we're doing lore about the Slaves of Darkness, because like I said, it's such a big part of their culture. So that is what we're going to go into. And also, when I was talking about the history, especially if you're quite new to Age of Sigmar and you hear me talking about the Chaos Gods, the Dark Gods, they are the same. And just in case you don't know who they are, this bit's going to really help you get your head around it. And also, this isn't just going to be me simply just talking about the four main Chaos Gods. Of course, I'll be covering them, but I'm also going to talk about how they are interpreted to the different cultures of the Slaves to Darkness. And I'll start by telling you that the Chaos Gods are some of the oldest beings in existence, known as the Dark Gods, that dwell and rule in a unbelievably terrifying and nightmarish realm of chaos. The Dark Gods gain their unmeasurable power through the passion and sins of all who inhabit the realms. By this sheer accumulation of power, the Chaos Gods are known as the biggest threat to the mortal realms, as they seek to twist them into the ever-expanding realm of chaos. Despite this, these are the gods of whom the Slaves to Darkness call their deities, and offer their souls individually to, in order to become as powerful as possible on their path to glory. There are endless ideologies of the Slaves to Darkness. This is a way to describe the multiple different forms of which the Slaves to Darkness worship the dark powers. And what I'm going to do is explain the four main Chaos Gods, and I am going to give examples as well of their, like I say, ideologies. Because as I've mentioned already in the video quickly, not every single culture or tribe of the Slaves to Darkness sees the gods exactly the same and portrayed the same as all the other tribes. So the first one I want to talk about is Khorne. The Blood God is the oldest of the Dark Gods. He receives worship through combat, murder and slaughter. His war cry is blood for the Blood God, skulls for the Skull Throne. Khorne cares not where the blood of his devotion comes from, be it in genocide committed by his followers, or be it in the blood of his followers themselves. Khorne cares not, as he will feast upon all blood, as well as his obsession of spilt blood. Khorne desires the skulls of all the inhabitants of the realms to be piled up upon his ever-growing throne of skulls. Although Khorne desires the skulls of all, he would prefer the skulls of the mightiest warriors, champions, monsters, and enemies, as these skulls are worth more to the Blood God than any other. The followers of Khorne often see the Blood God in different ways. Some tribes in the realm of beasts may see him as a giant hound, bigger than a mountain range, whilst a tribe in the realm of life may see him as a giant kraken that has sunken many fleets, whereas the tribes in the realm of fire may see him as a mighty warrior greater than any mortal, of which they channel their rage through. Khorne gives his followers gifts that grant them unnatural strength and enormous power in combat. Whereas Khorne may be the oldest and is all about combat prowess, Tzeentch, the architect of fate, befitting his twisting nature, he has the most names of all the dark gods, such as the Changer of Ways, the Lord of Flux, the Grand Deceiver, and the Grand Conspirator. There are many other titles he possesses, however, some of which are unspeakable in all tongues other than demon. Tzeentch receives his worship through magic, manipulation, and deception, the changing of events, and through fate itself. Tzeentch has always spent his unending time pulling the strings of fate forever in his favour. He uses his followers as mere pawns in his great plan of domination through manipulation. The followers of Tzeentch often see the Changer of Ways in different forms. Some tribes in the realm of death may see him as an enormous carrion eagle that searches Shyish for corpses to pick clean, whereas a tribe in the realm of light may see him as a sun burning fully bright, full of knowledge but blinding to the touch, whilst tribes in the realm of metal may see him as a metallic mountain range, ever changing shape and form. Tzeentch is the master of knowledge, and he gifts his followers grand powers of magic and disguise to infiltrate the many and different societies of the realms. Whilst Nurgle, father of plagues, is the origin of every pandemic, plague, and outburst of disease and rot in all of the mortal realms, he gains devotion through the spreading of such sicknesses, decay, and corruption of the mortal realms themselves, with his ever-growing garden. Nurgle and his followers refers to himself as the god of life, wanting to twist the cycle of life into an undying cycle of corruption. An example of this is by a mortal man being one life. However, Nurgle would want to plant eggs of maggots within the man's guts, so that the eggs could hatch and the maggots would live within the man himself. Meaning where there was once one life, there are now countless others. The followers of Nurgle do not see themselves as evil, bloodthirsty rampagers or forces of malign intent, but instead the bearers of life to the suffering of the mortal realms. The followers of Nurgle see the father of plagues in many different aspects. Some in the realm of shadows believe he is a great shadowy mist upon the land, infecting the land and decaying anything it touches, whilst tribes in the realm of beasts believe he is a massive maggot burrowing its way from under the centre of the realm to the surface to spread its blessings upon the faithful, whereas those from the realm of life may believe he is in fact Mother Mort, who through her gifts of decay, the tribes may survive the incredibly hard conditions they live in. Known as Grandfather Nurgle to his followers, another common name for him is Grandfather Nurgle, and to his followers he blesses them with diseases to spread and to protect them from harm that may affect their great work. And then lastly we have Slaanesh, the Dark Prince and Princess's beauty is beyond imagination. Slaanesh is neither male or female, and he is the youngest, and certainly the best, of the Dark Gods. Slaanesh does not gain devotion through one single passion, but instead gains devotion through all excess of passion, most notably imperfection, joy, and lust itself. This is why warriors are drawn to worship Slaanesh, as they seek to pursue perfection on an obsessive scale, to become the best in their craft of warfare. It is not only warriors that are drawn to Slaanesh, but citizens of the mortal realms too, as it is always tempting for mortals to throw away the shackles of their imprisonment to society and live their wildest fantasies and dreams. Slaanesh is currently imprisoned and chained by the elven gods. However, his throne will not remain empty for long, as many mortal and demonic champions strive to take it. Although if any one of them were to achieve this task, their reign would be short-lived, as Slaanesh has been working tirelessly to break free of his prison and is almost there. The followers of Slaanesh see the Dark Prince and Princess in many ways. Tribes in the realm of life may believe he is a gigantic serpent chained to the ocean floor, who will break free one day to claim the realm of life and turn it into a land of perfection. Whilst other tribes from the realm of fire believe he/she is the very burning fire of passion that burns inside everyone's heart and soul, that makes people strive for their deepest desires. Whereas the temple of Slaanesh, from the realm of shadows, where they worship the god of perfection, similar to our own Greek mythology, the temple of Slaanesh is not evil in terms of its intent. It's actually quite the opposite. It believes that perfection through the gifts of Slaanesh are the next step in evolution for citizens in the mortal realms. And as so, the Temple of Slaanesh is dedicated to bringing enlightenment of the purity of perfection to every creature in the realms, one way or another. Slaanesh gives his followers the deepest desires they have, as none are beyond his or her powers to grant. At first they may seem like innocent wishes, however they soon turn darker the further they worship him or her, as Slaanesh is also the god of excess and obsession. This could be improving swordsmanship, precision with a bow, or even gifts pursuing your vanity to make you so alluring no one can resist you. The gift could even be empowering the sheer feel of pleasure a follower Slaanesh feels when they indulge their psychotic desires, making them chase the dragon's tail to increase this overwhelming feeling. Although many mortals and creatures willingly dedicate themselves to the dark gods, the Chaos Gods will still receive power through those who do not follow them. For Khorne will still gain power from a bloody battle between Stormcast Eternals and Flesh-Eater Courts, or even a murder in an alley next to a tavern, to even as little as a scholar who cuts her finger on the pages of the book she is reading. Whilst Tzeentch will still gain power through wizards trying to learn as much as possible of laws of magic, or a commander trying to become as knowledgeable as possible in the field of warfare, to even as little to a huntress deciding to change the route she takes back to her home after a hunt. On the other hand, Nurgle will still gain power from a war-torn land where famine and decay have become ripe in the lands. Or to as small as a mortal who has cut their leg, which has become an infected wound, and now the mortal is a carrier of disease. Whereas Slaanesh will still gain power from an army of daughters of Cain who have dedicated their lives in perfecting their art of their combat capabilities, or a general who oversees the defences of a bastion of order and is obsessive over trying to make there be no weaknesses in the bastion's defence, or as little as a person who indulges in their passion for food. So that is the part of the video looking at the Chaos Gods, and all I can say is when I read the entirety of that Slaves to Darkness battle tone and more beyond that, there's so much more to the Chaos Gods and how the Slaves to Darkness interpret them, rather than just the same, what Khorne is basically in 40k as what it is in Age of Sigmar and for the rest of the gods. It's nice to see the different examples of how different tribes from different cultures and different realms could represent their deity, if you like. One of the things that I did is for the Slaanesh one, the Temple Slaanesh is actually an idea I came up with, and some of the other ideas for the other gods is something that I put in there as well, because really you can do what you like, because there's an unnumbered amount of different tribes and cultures out there who worship the dark gods in all different ways, and it's interesting to see how the Slaves to Darkness see the Chaos Gods compared to, if you look at the god-specific books like Blades of Khorne, Hedonites of Slaanesh, Disciples of Tzeentch, and Maggot King of Nurgle. It's nice to see how the Slaves to Darkness are different from them. Of course, if you want to use the lore from those different god-specific books, you can, but what I felt with the Slaves to Darkness book is it really gives you the scope to be able to come up with whatever idea you would like to and what can really theme your army. As for example, my Slaves to Darkness army is the what I call the Temple Slaanesh. So it's all very ancient Greek theme, particularly focusing on mythology and stuff, and how I've done some conversions. So it just gives you lots of, like I say, scope you can go from. And with that done, we're now going to look at my last part, which is going to be Path to Glory. We'll look at essentially why people would join the ranks of Slaves to Darkness and what is their ultimate goal. So, the Path to Glory is essentially the moment when a mortal will bargain away their soul for the promise of power to the Chaos Gods. From that moment forward, they have taken the first step on their path to glory, where they hope to become much more powerful, get many gifts from the gods, and most importantly, raise their status amongst the Slaves to Darkness. Unfortunately, though, most die before any glory is reached, because surviving in the mortal realms is certainly a lot harder than it is to survive in our world, and a lot harder than it would have been back in the Dark Age as well. It's a very, very nasty place, so even if you dedicate yourselves to the Chaos Gods, does not mean you are immune to all the many horrors of the mortal realms. However, let's say our chap here, who's dedicated himself, and let's say he's a status of just a normal cultist or a Chaos Marauder or something like that, let's say he catches the eye of the Dark Gods. He's been doing quite well. He's been doing lots of killing. He's been spreading disease, whatever his, poison is, if you like. So they may receive gifts and boons from those gods. And like I said, that's really what that cultist would be after. And by receiving those boons or gifts, that may make him the equivalent of a Chaos Warrior. Now, it's no certain, a rank structure. So we look at, one of our armies where you start as private and you make your way up. This is a case of they will become, powerful enough to be a Chaos Warrior. And then if they keep on going that way, they will become, maybe a champion, something like that, an exalted hero. And they will keep climbing. If this champion, at this point, decides to dedicate themselves to a particular god, the other gods may, unusually enough, still actually try to tempt the champion with gifts to worship them. So they say we've got a guy who's dedicated himself to Khorne. He's very, combat focused, everything like that. He likes to spill blood for the blood god. You may still see Slaanesh trying to work, their fingers in there by basically making the warrior try and take more pleasure by causing the pain of when he slashes his axe out there, and by rewarding him with gifts to try and tempt him over. Because, like we say, the Chaos Gods are all powerful and they have an incredible amount of followers. But obviously, if they have a champion there who is exceptionally good, it's only going to increase their power. So they are keen for that. So this champion, like we said, he went from a cultist to a Chaos Warrior to the rank and, status of champion. At this sort of point is when he starts leading his own warband. And essentially how this comes about is the other cultists and warriors nearby will start looking at him and go, he's essentially got the eye of the gods upon him. He's attracting their attention. If I fight with him and alongside him, maybe I will catch the eye of the gods and I will become something like him and have his power as my own. That's the general idea of it. And then when the champion has a few followers of their own, they may take on, an other small, tribe or settlement. And then the survivors of that tribe or settlement will basically be put to the sword and offer the choice if they want to join the champion and his merry bunch. And then you can see how the war band will grow and grow. Of course, there may not be survivors, they may just slaughter them all. Depends really on the champion and his characteristic charms, shall we say. So as you can see, the warband can slowly get bigger and bigger and bigger. However, it's not as simple as a Uruk Warg, I'd say, or a Warg, however it's pronounced. I think it's Warg, I don't think the R is pronounced, I've been told. But we'll see. But anyway, it's not the same of an Uruk Warg because that is just a massive snowball effect, and it will just get bigger and bigger and bigger the more orcs join. And that's, to a certain point, true with the Slaves of Darkness. But the size of the warband, unless it's a phenomenon size, and it's, led by one of the Varangard, someone of such high status, the size of the warband will fluctuate. So it will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then that means that the followers of the champion have themselves become basically Chaos Champions at that point, and then they'll break away to form their own warbands, and it will become kind of like a splinter effect, and more warbands will pop up, which obviously means the forces of chaos does grow, but the size of that warband not necessarily. Eventually, though, it will get bigger, but it goes up and down, a bit like a spiky graph chart. So that is really comes to the organisation of the standard warbands within the Slaves of Darkness. Of course, you have certain, warlords out there who command legions upon legions of Chaos Warriors, and essentially they've gone through the same sort of thing. They've just been doing it for a very long time. And then, of course, you have RK on the Everchosen. That guy deserves his own lore and his own video, but he is the Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse, and literally everyone obeys what he says. Doesn't matter if you're the toughest Chaos Warlord champion around for hundreds of miles, you listen to this guy. Like I said, the Slaves of Darkness fight amongst themselves a lot. They're not a united front, but if Archaon tells them to be, you can damn right guarantee they will do anything he says, because they are more scared of him than they are of pretty much anything else bar the Chaos Gods. So essentially that is the sort of structure of how the warband grows, and that does tie into the Path of Glory, so I wanted to say it now. However, this is merely the start. There are 2 other destinations the champion could end up, one better than the other. So, if the champion doesn't end up dead, like we mentioned earlier, there are 2 outcomes. The first one I want to talk about is the, let's just say, less sought out option. So, although the Chaos Gods can be generous with their mutations and boons and gifts, sometimes full, pure amount of Chaos energy can be too much for even a champion of great victories and slaughter. When this straw finally breaks, the champion's body will snap and rip itself apart, turning itself into an abomination of reality, until the once mighty champion is now a hulking mass of flesh with new grotesque limbs and appendixes and mutations. With no intellect left of this great warrior, they are now nothing more than a chaos spawn. As bad luck as this may seem, sometimes the dark gods simply tire of the champion, even though they have not lacked in any of their dedication to the dark gods. Regardless, the gods may turn the champion into a spawn for the split-second pleasure of it. So, yep, if a champion does everything right, doesn't fail in devotion, doesn't wake up one day and just go, you know what, I can't be bothered for this shit. He could be doing everything he can, not lacking devotion, increasing his devotion, but the Chaos Gods have just decided, you know what, this would be funner just to see for a second you turn into a spawn. It doesn't necessarily have to be like the champion's body just can't take the mutations anymore. It can just be the gods doing it on purpose, which is part of their fun. You know, these gods are not nice. They're cruel. The only reason people follow them is to save their own skin or to try and get a slight aspect of that godly power. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that even if they don't turn into a spawn, the amount of mutations they get, some of them are good. Their skin may turn as hard as iron, so it's harder to penetrate them. Or they may simply grow a pair of wings or a third arm to use to hold an even more impressive Chaos Rune Shield. However, you may be, shall we say the word, gifted with 2 new mouths. However, they have now taken over your eyes. So where your eye sockets are, you have 2 mouths there now. And now you can't see, and you don't have the foresight to be able to sense the enemy. So that could happen. Or you could grow a new spike, a new horn, but this one comes out from the middle of your neck, so you can't really maneuver properly. Or you may grow a tail that's so fat you are no longer swift on your feet. So you could have lots of like nastier mutations as well. Doesn't mean it's going to be good for you. So, you know, spawndom isn't like everything's great as long as you don't die of spawndom. There are other things, and you could be like I said, a mighty champion, and then like you're fantastic, and then let's say you're a champion of Slaanesh, all about speed, all about finesse, and then Nurgle's managed to get his fingers in you, and now suddenly you have maggots bursting out of your chest. Not really ideal, is it? So those are the negatives. However, now I will tell you what every champion strives for. And that is the true impossible chosen champions, the very minute, who have survived and have shown favour beyond all others to the dark gods, will finally be given everything they have so fought over and have came close to death 1,000 times for. That is the gift of immortality. To become a demon prince, the ultimate prize. So yes, this is what everyone who begins their path to glory, which is practically everyone in the Slaves of Darkness, practically everyone who worships chaos It's going for this goal. That's become a demon prince. And with that, they lose their mortality and they become immortal. That does mean that they're tied closer to like the Chaos Realm with that, because they kind of more become an aspect of their god. But that is what they strive for. And I really can't stress just how minute of a population of the Slaves to Darkness actually reach this point. So when you see a demon prince on the battlefield, that one demon prince could have been alive for centuries, could have been fighting for centuries before he became a demon prince. So it really goes to show just how rare demon princes are. And if you look at taking the Despoiler sub-allegiance for the Slaves to Darkness, which very much focuses on Slaves to Darkness demon princes, and although you may see like 2 or 3 in that list or something, and you think like, oh, they're everywhere, that sub-allegiance is incredibly elite, you know, narrative wise and lore wise. To see like 3 demon princes in the same army of whatever a 2,000 point army would look in a, you know, a narrative setting, you know, it's not like beyond imaginable hordes of chaos. It's relatively small if you think about it compared to endless legions. 3 demon princes in a single force like that goes to show just how elite that is and how it stands out from the other war bands you see going around. And that's why the spoilers very much focus on demon princes. Very much shows it's very elite focus, and it's like the champions of the gods on the battlefield. And that's why, for example, as you will see when the review comes up for the allegiances and sub-allegiances, which will be soon, you'll get to really hear why I love the spoilers, because I love me a demon prince so much, especially when it's Slaanesh. And just in case you're wondering why I said Slaanesh was the best idea, simply because it's the coolest. I don't really care about any other argument with that one. And with that, guys, that's actually going to bring us towards an end of my Slaves to Darkness lore video part 2. So I hope you've enjoyed this very much. If you have, smash that like button and smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you have, make sure you click the bell icon, so it means you'll never miss a video in this series or any other video I put up on the channel. If you're very much invested in Slaves to Darkness, you want to know more, I'd hate for you to miss out the very in-depth series that's literally kicking off on this channel as we speak. I also want to say, if you want to comment anything down below, you've got any questions around about Slaves to Darkness, could be lore, could be rules, could be anything else, or if there's anything that you agree or disagree with me, put that in the comments as well. It'd be great to have that discussion with you. It's always great to hear your guys' thoughts. And I want to do a massive shout out to my patrons as well. Because of them, I can continue to do YouTube. Can't thank them enough. If you'd like to become a patron, there's a link to it in the description down below. If you just check it out, I'd be amazed. It would mean the world. And it's only, you can do $1 a month, which really does go to help keep the channel going. What I also want to say is, like I say, this is part 2 of the Slaves to Darkness, lore videos. And although I kind of explained this at the start, I do just want to say that the first lore video is still valid. To be honest, it lines up quite nicely as a part 1, because although in it I do talk about how they work in Age of Sigmar, a lot of the video is kind of based around Norska and the Warriors of Chaos of the world that was, and how they have transferred over to Age of Sigmar. So it's a good starting point if you're very much coming from fantasy as well. You can see how the model range and stuff has come over. So I'm going to keep that in the series as part 1, despite it being a couple of years older. I think it leads into this one, so go check it out if you haven't. I think it was one of the first sort of like main Slaves to Darkness lore videos on YouTube, so it got a decent amount of views when Slaves to Darkness got an update, and I was a little bit embarrassed because like this lore video is a little bit old. So I think it's good to come up with a new one. What I have done, because Slaves to Darkness, bar everything to do with death, after all, I am Agent Nagash. Death is my favourite in all its forms, but the Slaves to Darkness really have to be my favourite army other than anything to do with death. Like I say, like I do really like other armies, you know, I've mentioned before, you know, Skaven are awesome, or, you know, like Ogres and Oryx and Gloomspike, they're all cool, but for me, I just love the narrative of the Slaves to Darkness. I just love the path to glory, really. And even though I talked about it for probably, like, I don't know, around 10 minutes something in this video, I still feel like you can do it more justice by going so much in depth. And something that I'll be talking about in the army video is the Eye of the Gods mechanic, which is a way that simulates the path to glory in your own game of Slaves to Darkness when you play on tabletop. And it's not the most ability that's going to happen all the time. In some games you might forget, and it's not the most powerful ability, but it's just so nicely narratively driven. That's why I like the Slaves to Darkness. Every single one of the warriors has a story behind them, and I know, say that every army, you know, every model has its own little tale it tells, but Slaves to Darkness, I just love this idea of there's so many ways you can play the army. The narrative of the army really supports how they play on the tabletop as well. And honestly, how can you not like these just massive, heavily armoured Chaos Warriors? It's a great aesthetic. And the new models they brought out, I know it wasn't loads, it was just a start collecting box, but they've done a great job of updating the Chaos Knight kits and the Chaos Warrior kits, but also keeping the same aesthetic. So if you've got old Chaos Knights and old Chaos Warriors, they all go together and the aesthetic is still there and the same. I don't know when they'll be making the kit separately. Maybe by the time you guys are watching this video, if you're out there and you got to this point in the video, maybe they have made the kit separately. But for me, myself, I've got enough Slaves to Darkness to be working on, and I'm currently working on them now. Like I say, a Greek theme, so like my Chaos Knights are like centaurs and stuff, and it's all Slaanesh themed as well, and having an absolute ball with it. And like I say, I really love the army. It's going to be a very in-depth army series coming up, so make sure you stick around for that. So guys, like I say, thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. It took quite a lot of time doing the research for this one, I'll be completely honest, but I think it was worth it. I'm glad I did this rather than just like a quick 5-minute video going, basically this is what's happened in the new battle tome. I'm glad I took the time and effort into this, because Slaves to Darkness, in all honesty, they deserve the attention. So thank you very much for watching this video. Remember until next time to stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, stay hygienic, and of course remember, Nagash us all, and all is one in Nagash.